In the faraway village of Asala, there lived a woman named Ashabi. She was a beautiful food seller, and her cooking was the best in the whole village. Everyone called her Ashabi the cook because her food was so tasty that people came from all over to eat it. Every day, Ashabi would set up her stall and cook, and everyone loved to eat her food. She was very kind, and the villagers liked her a lot. Ashabi had a little girl named Kemi. She loved Kemi so much, and she did everything to make her happy. But Ashabi's life wasn't always easy. When she was pregnant with Kemi, something very sad happened. Ashabi's husband, Kemi's father, passed away. Ashabi was left alone to take care of Kemi all by herself. Even though Ashabi had no one to help her, she didn't give up. She worked very hard every single day to cook and sell food so she could take care of Kemi. She loved her daughter more than anything in the world. The villagers always saw how hard Ashabi worked, and they admired her. They knew life was not easy for her, but Ashabi never complained. She smiled and took care of Kemi the best she could. Ashabi and Kemi were always together, like best friends. They lived happily in the village, and nothing could break the love they shared. One day, something terrible happened in Asala village. A young man, strong and healthy, came to Ashabi's food stall. He was well known in the village, and like many others, he loved Ashabi's food. He smiled and ate his meal, just like everyone else. But later that day, the young man started to feel sick. His family gathered around him, trying to help, but soon he began to vomit blood. Everyone gasped. In Asala village, vomiting blood meant one thing: poison. The young man didn't survive. He passed away, and the village was in shock. News spread quickly, and everyone whispered the same thing: Ashabi poisoned him. The villagers were furious. How could someone so loved, someone they trusted, do such a thing? They didn't stop to think. They only wanted to punish her for what they believed she had done. A crowd gathered at Ashabi's stall. They shouted, "Murderer! Poisoner!" They didn't give Ashabi a chance to explain. The anger in their hearts was too strong. In their rage, the villagers grabbed stones. They stoned Ashabi until she fell to the ground, lifeless. Little Kemi, only 10 years old, watched it all. She cried and cried, but no one listened. Her mother, her only family, was gone. Ashabi, the kind woman who cooked for everyone, was gone forever, leaving Kemi alone in the world. After Ashabi's death, Kemi was all alone. The villagers couldn't keep her, so they decided to send her to a nearby village. There, Kemi's uncle, Ajala, lived. Uncle Ajala was kind, and when he heard what happened to Ashabi, he felt so sad. He welcomed Kemi into his home with open arms. Ajala had a family of his own, and they treated Kemi like she was one of them. Kemi was still sad about her mother, but Uncle Ajala and his family made sure she never felt alone. They gave her food, a warm bed, and lots of love. They always told her, "You are part of this family now." Kemi started to feel better as time went on. She missed her mother very much, but in her uncle's home, she found some happiness again. She played with her cousins and helped her aunt around the house. Life seemed brighter for little Kemi, and she slowly began to smile again. Even though the pain of losing her mother was still there, Kemi was thankful for her uncle. She felt like she had a new family, and that made her feel safe and loved. Years passed, and Kemi grew older. She was now 18, and Uncle Ajala had grown old. He watched Kemi grow into a beautiful young woman, but he knew there was something she needed to know. The truth about her mother's death had been kept from her for so long. One day, Ajala called Kemi to sit with him. He looked at her with sad eyes and said, "Kemi, there's something you need to know about your mother." Kemi listened closely as her uncle began to tell her the story. He explained how a young man had died after eating her mother's food. He told her how the villagers believed Ashabi had poisoned him, and in their anger, stoned her to death. Kemi's heart sank. She had always wondered what happened to her mother, and now, hearing the truth, she was filled with sadness and pain. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she thought about how unfair it all was. Her mother, who was so kind and loved by many, had died in such a terrible way. Uncle Ajala put his hand on her shoulder and said, "Your mother wasn't bad, Kemi. It was a terrible misunderstanding. The villagers didn't listen to her. They were blinded by anger." Kemi cried, but she was glad to finally know what had happened. Even though the truth was painful, she was thankful, her uncle told her. She missed her mother more than ever, but knowing the truth gave her a sense of peace. Not long after Uncle Ajala told Kemi the truth, something very sad happened. Uncle Ajala, who had been so kind and loving to her, passed away. Kemi was heartbroken once again. She had lost her mother, and now she had lost her uncle too. After the funeral, Kemi's cousins sat her down. They told her that they could no longer take care of her. "You're grown up now," they said. "You must find your own way." Kemi was shocked and felt completely alone once more. With nowhere else to go, Kemi thought about her mother. She remembered the village of Asala and how her mother had been loved there before everything went wrong. Maybe, just maybe, the villagers had forgiven her mother by now. Kemi made a big decision. She packed her things and returned to Asala village. She wanted to start fresh, just like her mother had done before her. Kemi thought that if she could cook and sell food like her mother, the people might accept her again. She hoped they wouldn't remember the terrible past and would see her as Kemi, not just the daughter of Ashabi. With hope in her heart, Kemi arrived in Asala, ready to start her new life. Kemi was full of hope when she set up her food stall in Asala village. She woke up early, just like her mother used to, and cooked delicious meals. She was ready for the villagers to come, to smell the tasty food, and to fill their bowls. But as the day went by, no one came. Kemi waited and waited, but the villagers kept their distance. They whispered to each other, remembering the tragedy that happened so many years ago. They still believed that Kemi's mother had poisoned the young man, and because of that, they didn't trust Kemi's food. Day after day, Kemi cooked and waited, but no one bought her food. The villagers passed by her stall, but they avoided her eyes. Kemi could feel their fear and doubt, and it made her heart heavy. Even though she was sad and hurt, Kemi didn't give up. She kept trying. She cooked the best meal she could, hoping that one day someone would give her a chance. But each day, the stall remained empty, and the food was left untouched. Kemi felt hopeless, but deep inside, she still believed that things could change. She held on to that hope and kept going, no matter how lonely it felt. One evening, after another long day of no sales, Kemi walked home with tears in her eyes. Her heart was heavy with sadness, and her feet dragged along the dusty path. She had tried so hard, but the villagers still refused to buy her food. The whispers about her mother followed her everywhere, and the pain of being alone weighed on her. As she walked down a lonely road, something strange happened. An old woman appeared from the shadows, her hunched back making her look small, but her eyes were sharp and glowing. Kemi had never seen this woman before. But there was something unsettling about her. This was no ordinary old woman. She was a witch. The old witch smiled at Kemi, a smile that sent chills down her spine. "Why are you crying, child?" the witch asked, her voice soft but full of something dark. Kemi wiped her tears and looked at the witch, unsure if she should speak, but the sadness in her heart made her talk. "No one buys my food," Kemi whispered. "They still remember my mother and what happened to her. They think I am like her." The witch nodded slowly, as if she already knew everything. "Ah, yes, your mother, Ashabi. The villagers still fear her, don't they?" the witch said, her voice soft but sharp. "But it's not just fear that keeps them away, child. Something is missing from your food." Kemi blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I cook the best food I can, just like my mother." The witch's smile widened, showing her crooked teeth. "It's not about how good it tastes," she said. "There's something you must add to your food to make the villagers come to you. Something special." Kemi stared at the old woman, feeling uneasy. "What is it?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The witch leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming in the dark. "Your pubic hair," she whispered. "Use your pubic hair to clean the food." And she reached into her old tattered robe and pulled out a small calabash. "Mix a little of this black substance into the food." Kemi's stomach turned. She stepped back, horrified by the thought. "No, that's disgusting. I can't do that." The witch chuckled, her laugh dry and cold. "Your mother thought the same thing, child. And look what happened to her. Your mother, Ashabi," she said. "The villagers believe she poisoned that young man, don't they? But the truth, child, is not what they think." Kemi looked at the witch, confused. "What do you mean? Everyone says my mother poisoned him." The witch's smile faded and her eyes grew cold. "Your mother didn't poison anyone," she said, her voice now serious. "It was us. We, the witches, caused that man's death." Kemi gasped. "But why?" "My mother wouldn't hurt anyone." The witch stepped closer, her voice turning sharp. "Your mother refused to join us. We asked her, we warned her, but she thought she could live her life without us. So we taught her a lesson. We killed that man, and we made the villagers believe it was her fault." Kemi's heart pounded in her chest. "You killed him? But why did you do that?" The witch's eyes gleamed in the dark. "We needed her to understand. She thought she could cook and live peacefully without our power. But when she refused to do as we said, we had to show her the price of disobedience. And so the villagers turned on her, and she paid with her life." Kemi felt sick. Her mother had died not because she was guilty, but because she had stood against the witches. The unfairness of it all made Kemi's stomach twist with anger and grief. You killed my mother," she whispered, her voice shaking. The witch laughed softly, a cruel sound that echoed in the night. "Yes, child. And now it's your turn to decide. Will you follow in your mother's footsteps and refuse us, or will you do what's necessary to survive?" Kemi's heart raced. She didn't want to believe the witch, but her words struck a deep fear in her. Was this why no one bought her food? Was this the secret to breaking the curse of her mother's past? The witch reached into her robe and pulled out a small calabash. "Like I said earlier, there is something missing from your food, Kemi," she said, holding the calabash out to her. "If you want to sell your food, if you want the villagers to come to you, you must use your pubic hair to clean the food. And," she added, her voice growing darker, You must mix a little of this black substance into it. Kemi's stomach turned with disgust. No, I can't do that. It's horrible, she cried. The witch's smile returned, this time more menacing than before. Your mother thought the same thing. And look where that led her. Dead at the hands of angry villagers. She placed the calabash into Kemi's hands. If you refuse, child, you will face the same fate. Don't be a fool like your mother. Kemi stared at the small calabash, her hands trembling. The witch's words echoed in her mind. Was this her only chance to survive, to break free from the curse her mother had faced? The witch turned and began to walk away, her figure disappearing into the shadows. Think carefully, Kemi, she called over her shoulder. Your life depends on it. Kemi stood there, alone in the darkness, the weight of the calabash heavy in her hands. Her mind raced with fear and uncertainty. Could she really do what the witch had said? Was it worth risking her life to follow the same path her mother had refused? That night, Kemi couldn't sleep. The witch's words echoed in her mind. Her mother had refused the witches, and it had cost her life. Kemi didn't want to follow the same path, but the thought of doing something so terrible made her feel sick. She paced around her small room, looking at the calabash the witch had given her. Kemi thought about her mother. Ashabi had been brave, standing up to the witches, but what had it brought her? A tragic death, accused of a crime she didn't commit. And now, Kemi stood at the same crossroads. She felt trapped, with no good choices. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through her window, Kemi made her decision. She couldn't live like this anymore, with no one buying her food, with the whispers of the villagers haunting her every step. If following the witch's advice was the only way to survive, then she would do it. The next morning, Kemi went to her stall as usual. She prepared the food, but this time she did something she never thought she would. She took her pubic hair, just like the witch had said, and used it to clean the food. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to continue. Then she opened the calabash and sprinkled a tiny bit of the black substance into the pot. Her heart pounded as she stirred the food, hoping no one would ever find out what she had done. She was filled with shame, but she pushed the feelings aside, determined to see what would happen. When Kemi opened her stall that day, she was nervous. Would anyone come? Would the food taste different? Would the villagers somehow know what she had done? But to her surprise, something amazing happened. One by one, people began to approach her stall. At first, it was just a few curious villagers, and then more and more came. They asked for bowls of her food, and Kemi served them, watching in disbelief as they ate and smiled. "This is delicious," one man said. "I haven't tasted food this good in a long time," another woman added. The villagers, who had once avoided her, now couldn't get enough of her cooking. By the end of the day, Kemi had sold everything. Her pots were empty, and her stall was surrounded by people talking about how good her food was. Word spread quickly, and soon, everyone in the village was talking about Kemi's delicious meals. Kemi couldn't believe it. For the first time since she had returned to Asala village, she felt a glimmer of hope. The witch's strange advice had worked, and Kemi's stall was busy with customers. She had done something she never imagined, but it had brought her success. As the sun set and Kemi packed up her stall, she thought about her choice. She didn't feel proud of what she had done, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. The villagers loved her food, and she had finally found a way to survive. As time passed, Kemi's food stall grew more popular. What had started as a small operation soon became the busiest spot in the entire village. People from nearby towns and villages began to travel to Asala just to taste Kemi's famous cooking. Her food had become something special. Everyone talked about it, and people couldn't get enough. Within a year, Kemi had become the most successful food seller, not only in Asala, but in the surrounding areas as well. With all the money she made, she built herself a large, beautiful house, one of the finest in the village. It was so big that everyone who passed by would stop and stare. The house was grand, with strong walls and shiny windows, and it stood as a symbol of Kemi's success. But even as Kemi's business grew, she never let anyone else cook the food. She hired many workers to help run her stall, serve the food and clean up, but the cooking was always done by her alone. She didn't want anyone else to know the secret behind her success, the strange and dark ritual that kept the villagers coming back for more. While Kemi's fame spread, not everyone was happy. The women in the village began to notice how much their husbands admired Kemi. They whispered among themselves, jealous and suspicious. Why are the men always at her stall, they wondered. They're too interested in her food and in her. Soon, rumors began to spread. People whispered that Kemi had some kind of power over the men in the village. The women were convinced that something was wrong. She must be using magic, they said. How else could she rise to the top so quickly? How else could she make her husbands admire her so much? But Kemi paid no attention to the gossip. She was focused on her business, and the rumors didn't bother her. She had everything she had ever wanted: money, a beautiful home, and a thriving business. The whispers and jealousy of the village women couldn't take that away from her. Kemi's success only grew. She became the talk of every village around, and people came from even farther away just to taste her cooking. But deep inside, she knew the price she had paid for this fame. She had followed the witch's advice, and while it brought her wealth, it also brought a shadow over her heart. No matter how much success she had, there was a part of Kemi that still felt uneasy. She ignored it, pushing it to the back of her mind, but the feeling was always there, quiet but waiting. One cold and quiet night, as Kemi sat alone in her grand house, lost in thought, a sudden chill filled the room. The wind howled outside, and the lights flickered. Before Kemi could even get up to check, a familiar figure appeared in the corner of the room. It was the old witch. Kemi's heart sank as she saw the witch's crooked smile and glowing eyes. It had been so long since she had last seen her, and though Kemi had tried to forget, deep down, she knew the witch would return one day. "Kemi," the witch said in a voice that sent shivers down Kemi's spine. "It's time." "Time for what?" Kemi asked, though she already feared the answer. The witch's smile widened. "You didn't think your success would come without a price forever, did you? We've given you wealth, power, and fame. Now, it's time to pay us back." Kemi swallowed hard. "But I've done everything you asked. I followed your advice. Isn't that enough?" The witch shook her head slowly. "No, child. The small sacrifice you made was only the beginning. It's time for something bigger now. We need your womb." Kemi gasped. "My womb? But why?" The witch's eyes darkened. "To keep your success, to hold on to everything you've gained, you must give up the chance to have children. You will never have a family of your own. That is the price you must pay to keep your fortune." Kemi's heart pounded. She had dreamed of having children one day, of starting a family and sharing her success with them. Her beautiful house felt so empty, and she had always hoped that one day it would be filled with the laughter of children. No, Kemi said, shaking her head. I can't do that. I want children. I want a family. I've worked so hard for everything I have, but I don't want to give up my future for it. The witch's smile faded, replaced by a cold stare. You think you can refuse us, Kemi? Do you think you can walk away from the bargain we made? If you don't give us your womb, you will lose everything. Your wealth, your fame, your house, it will all be gone. Kemi's hands trembled. The thought of losing everything terrified her, but the idea of giving up the chance to be a mother was even worse. No, she said again, her voice stronger this time. I won't do it. I'll find another way. The witch's face twisted with anger. There is no other way, Kemi, she hissed. If you don't pay the price, you will face the consequences, and they will be far worse than anything you can imagine. Kemi stood tall, her heart racing, but her mind made up. I won't give you my womb. I'll take whatever comes, but I won't give up my future for this. The witch glared at Kemi, her eyes burning with fury. Very well, she said, her voice cold and sharp. You've made your choice, but remember, Kemi, everything has a price, and yours will be paid in full. With that, the witch disappeared, leaving Kemi alone in the dark, her heart pounding with fear of what was to come. The morning after the witch's visit, a strange wind blew through the village of Asala. The breeze was unlike anything the villagers had ever felt. Cold and sharp, it whipped through the streets, rattling windows and shaking doors. But something even stranger happened at Kemi's house. The wind had caused damage to her secret room, the room where she kept her cooking supplies and performed the dark ritual the witch had taught her. A small hole appeared in the wall, just large enough for someone to peek through. It was here that one of the village women, curious about Kemi's sudden rise to fame, noticed the gap. The woman had always been suspicious of Kemi, and now, with this chance, she couldn't resist. She crouched down and looked through the hole. What she saw shocked her to the core. Inside, Kemi was preparing her food, just as she did every day. But the woman watched in horror as Kemi took her pubic hair and mixed it into the food. She also saw Kemi sprinkle the mysterious black substance from the small calabash the witch had given her. The woman gasped and stumbled back from the hole, her heart racing. This is witchcraft, she whispered to herself, horrified by what she had seen. Without wasting another moment, she ran to tell the other villagers. It didn't take long for the news to spread like wildfire. The villagers, filled with anger and fear, gathered at Kemi's house. They dragged her out to the village square, demanding answers. The crowd grew larger and louder, their voices full of rage and betrayal. Kemi stood before them, trembling. The village elders stepped forward and asked her to explain. Is it true, Kemi? One elder asked. Have you been using witchcraft in your cooking? At first, Kemi wanted to deny it, to lie, and protect herself. But the weight of everything, the guilt, the fear, the witch's curse, pressed down on her. She couldn't lie anymore. With tears in her eyes, Kemi nodded and confessed everything. She told them about the witch, the pubic hair, the black substance, and how she had followed the witch's instructions to become successful. The villagers were shocked. They had trusted Kemi, admired her, and now they felt betrayed. Their anger grew, and some of them shouted for Kemi to be punished. The village elders summoned the oracle to decide Kemi's fate. The oracle, an ancient and wise woman, arrived at the village square. She looked at Kemi with a stern face, and after listening to the villagers, she gave Kemi two choices. You have sinned greatly, Kemi, the oracle said. You can either sacrifice your womb to the witches as they demand, or you will face death for your crimes. The choice is yours. Kemi's heart sank. She had already refused the witch's demand for her womb, but now the threat of death loomed over her. The thought of losing her life terrified her, and she realized she wasn't ready to die. I choose life, Kemi whispered, her voice barely audible. The oracle nodded. Very well. You will live, but you are forbidden from ever selling food in this village again. You will leave this place, and you will never return. The villagers murmured among themselves, some still angry, but others relieved that Kemi had not been sentenced to death. Feeling utterly defeated, Kemi gathered what little she had and left the village. She didn't look back as she walked away from the place where her mother had died, the place where she had once hoped to rebuild her life. Her dream had turned into a nightmare, and now she had lost everything. The tale of Kemi was told for years in Asala village, a warning to all who heard it. The villagers remembered how greed and revenge had led to Kemi's downfall, and they spoke of how chasing success at any cost could destroy even the brightest of lives. Kemi was never seen in the village again. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.